After being cast as the villainess for the 99th time, she decided she was done. What right did the author have to control their lives with a single sentence, forcing them to act foolishly again? And again, just to pave the way for the hero and heroine? This time she decided to be a kind villainess, determined to change her wicked father and rewrite her tragic fate. The girl everyone scorned was about to meet her 99th death. She hadn't done anything wrong, yet because her father was an irredeemable villain, this was the fate she'd been dealt. Sometimes it simply felt unfair, being the daughter of a scoundrel. She looked up at the man before her, the one about to end her life. They'd shared the same miserable childhood, yet because he was the male lead, he'd become a king adored by all. He truly was the author's favorite. The king told her that if she knelt now and begged for mercy, she could die by poison, instead of suffering a sword through the heart. But to the girl, dead was dead either way, so she simply told the king to bring it on. Furious, he raised his sword high. Just as the girl thought it was finally over, she found herself back in the familiar space between lives. Every character in this world had been created by the author, roughly divided into leads and side characters. Leads possessed their own self-awareness, while side characters could only follow the roles the author had written for them, and any deviation was forbidden. The girl was a professional extra C, at having played the villain's daughter 99 times. The same tired villainous script had nearly broken her. Every time she entered the story, she lost her memories and became a puppet acting out the plot. Still, the life she'd just finished had been the hardest run yet. Her father had been obsessed with her mother, ignoring her since childhood. If only he could have doted on his daughter instead, maybe their family's ending wouldn't have been so tragic. But unfortunately, as the villain's daughter, she never got a second chance. The author only showed mercy to his leads. Just as she was thinking this, a strange light suddenly enveloped her. How is it already time for my 100th life? I hope this one isn't as miserable. The moment she finished her wish, she heard familiar cursing. To her surprise, she found she hadn't been reborn as a baby this time. Looking at the red-haired maid cursing up a storm before her, she instinctively called out a name. Alice? The response was a hard slap. You little brat, how dare you say my name so casually? The girl then realized the maid in front of her was the very same wicked servant who had tormented her in her past life, long-haired Alice. Why would she be tangled up with this woman again in this life? It was absurd. And this familiar surrounding, along with this familiar head of black hair, could it be that the author had finally shown her mercy? This point in the timeline was when her mother had fled her father and taken shelter at the Viscount's house, right when she and her mother endured inhuman abuse. Just as she stood dazed, the wicked Viscount arrived, ready to lock her up. But knowing her father would come to save them soon, the girl bravely stood up and shouted at the Viscount, "Does this man even know who my father is? How dare he make me a slave?" But no one took her words seriously. The Viscount grew even bolder. After all, her father didn't even know she existed. He then callously threw the girl to Alice, ordering her to lock the girl in the warehouse. At the word warehouse, the girl immediately sensed something was wrong. According to the plot, she would stay with her mother the whole time, and the only time her mother had ever been in that warehouse was when she died. Sure enough, once she was thrown inside, she found her mother's cold, lifeless body. The girl broke down in tears. Why did the cursed author have to bring her back at this exact moment? Once again, in this life, she failed to save her mother, the only woman across all these lifetimes who had ever given her warmth, and now she was gone forever. Suddenly, the girl heard a faint noise behind her. She turned around and spotted a golden-haired boy in the corner. Since she died at the hands of the golden-haired male lead in her past life, she'd developed a lasting fear of blonde hair. Considering the male lead would be around her age, could this boy be him? But the male lead shouldn't be here right now. To confirm whether he really was the male lead, the girl reached out and lifted his bangs. Seeing his jet-black eyes, she finally let out a sigh of relief. This wasn't the male lead after all. His eyes should be gold. She apologized for her rude behavior, but quickly realized something was off. According to the villainous script, she shouldn't be capable of these kinds of actions. Yet now there seemed to be no such restrictions. To test her theory, she began chatting warmly with the boy, and to her excitement, the words came out smoothly. But she soon noticed something strange about him. Why did he stay curled up in the corner without saying a word? Just as she was about to investigate further, the boy's stomach let out a huge growl. The girl realized he must be starving, So she eagerly pulled out her own croissant and offered it to him. But he kept refusing her kindness, which annoyed her. Here she was trying so hard to be a kind villainess, and this kid wouldn't even accept it. So she grabbed him and stuffed the croissant into his mouth. Oops, sorry, my hand slipped and it ended up in your mouth. After that little scuffle, the boy finally agreed to eat her croissant, and the two grew closer because of it. The girl learned the boy's name was Xian, and after chatting for a while, the two fell asleep. When she woke up again, Xian was nowhere to be found. Could he have slipped away on his own without anyone noticing? But she had no time to worry about him, because the wall behind her suddenly exploded. A man who looked almost identical to her burst through, rushing to embrace her mother. It was her obsessive father, finally here. The Devil Duke had torn the empire apart searching for his wife, but by the time he found her again, she'd already become a cold corpse, leaving behind a daughter who looked just like him. Yet he cared nothing for his daughter's well-being, obsessed only with reviving his wife, not realizing this very obsession would eventually bring ruin to the entire family. As a reborn soul, the girl knew this cliched plot all too well. So facing her deranged father again left her deeply unsettled. Sure enough, upon learning of her mother's death, he immediately, without a second thought, nearly strangled her with magic. Honestly, couldn't this madman have taken one good look at her face before losing it? Anyone could tell they were father and daughter. And how could a defenseless 5-year-old possibly be the killer? Fortunately, the knight captain by her father's side was a reasonable man, and recognized her at a glance. "Duke, don't you think this child's hair and eye color look familiar?" And she called the lady mother. The atmosphere turned incredibly awkward. Her father finally stopped losing his mind and had the captain bring the girl along, planning to confirm their relation with a paternity test later. They walked through a long corridor to where the Viscount was being held. The moment he saw her father, he began begging for mercy. "Duke, this is all a huge misunderstanding. When the lady took shelter with us, she showed no signs of being nobility. How was I supposed to know she was your wife?" Hearing this, the girl couldn't help but roll her eyes. This man had clearly accepted the Black Panther brooch representing House Valois, yet he still dared to lie through his teeth. Fortunately, her father wasn't fooled either. Grabbing the man by the hair, "I've been spreading word everywhere that I was searching for my wife. You expect me to believe you knew nothing?" As the Viscount continued to deny it, the girl stepped forward to call him out. "He knew all along and deliberately kept quiet because he despised our family. Even when Mother fell ill, he ignored us, forced me to work as a slave, and eventually locked us in that pitch-black warehouse." Seeing the girl's tattered clothes, her father was inclined to believe her. So he made an outrageous decision, letting the 5-year-old decide the Viscount's punishment herself, as a way to confirm she truly carried the Duke's bloodline. The Viscount thought he'd finally escaped death, not realizing the girl was even more ruthless than the Duke himself. "In that case, Viscount, let's start by cutting off your little finger. After all, our family is famously known as demons, so this much shouldn't be a problem." Hearing her chilling words, the Viscount immediately grabbed at the girl's hem, begging for mercy. But she only looked back at him with icy eyes. "It's too late to beg now. I'll start with your fingers and toes, bit by bit. After all, starting at the neck wouldn't be any fun." The captain nearby trembled at hearing such vicious words from a 5-year-old girl. She truly is the Duke's own blood, so ruthless even at such a young age. Her father seemed rather pleased with her performance and even remarked that her eyes resembled his own. Of course, in the end, nothing actually happened to the Viscount. He simply fainted from sheer terror on his own. They then found the unconscious Xian in the warehouse. The moment he was carried out, the girl grew anxious and tugged at her father's sleeve, pleading for him to spare Xian. Her father simply chuckled. Who said anything about killing that kid? He then ordered someone to bring Xian back to the estate for treatment. After finishing up at the Viscount's estate, the girl rode home with her father in the carriage. By then, the Duke's household was in complete chaos, the servants buzzing with talk about this girl they'd never met. Among them, the orange-haired maid Lisa was appointed as the girl's personal attendant by the head housekeeper. When her father's group finally arrived at the estate, seeing him carry her mother's body inside, with the girl quietly following behind, Lisa felt an ache in her heart, and resolved to take good care of the girl from now on. Seeing Lisa's bright smile, the girl felt uneasy. In her memory, whenever Lisa smiled like that, trouble was sure to follow. Over time, Lisa had grown withdrawn and quiet. And now, thinking back, it was all because of the girl's own cruelty. she had tormented a perfectly good person into that state. After being cleaned up, Lisa took the girl to eat. Watching the head chef eagerly anticipate her reaction, the girl felt a pang of guilt. In her past life, she'd thrown away his hard-cooked meals more times than she could count, simply calling them terrible. What weighed on her even more was the servants' intense gazes. In her past life, her wicked deeds had made them all avoid her. Now receiving so much affection was almost unbearable. Lisa even wanted to stay by her side forever, a sweet yet heavy burden to bear. What she couldn't quite believe, though, was how Lisa saw her father. All these years of his heroic quest to find his wife had somehow turned him into Lisa's fantasy of a devoted, romantic male lead. She even wished for the girl to find a man just as wonderful someday. All the girl could do was laugh awkwardly. This wicked little villainess probably didn't deserve such luck. Her father was the most infamous, deranged duke in history. To force the queen to help revive her mother, he sent the queen a severed head every single day. The poor woman was terrified into madness and eventually killed by his own hand. Given how insane he was, it was almost expected that their whole family would eventually be wiped out. But as his innocent children, they were the ones who had to pay for it, having done nothing wrong yet forced to suffer the consequences alongside him. The thought of living through all this again left the girl utterly hopeless. Seeing the girl in this state, Lisa clearly misread the situation and launched into an enthusiastic speech about all the virtues of their family. When Lisa had first stepped into the working world, she'd been terrified of becoming a maid, having heard countless stories of servants meeting mysterious ends in noble households. But after arriving at House Valois, she discovered it was nothing like the rumors. They worked 9 to 5 with punctual hours, were served 3 delicious meals a day, even had a dedicated break room, and most importantly, generous vacation time. This place was basically a working person's dream come true. The girl listened, feeling deeply embarrassed. Lisa apparently had never realized how fortunate she truly was, all thanks to her master, the father, who was rarely ever home. In her past life, the girl had worked Lisa to the bone like a beast of burden. If not for the fact that she could finally break free from her scripted role this time, poor Lisa would have been doomed to that same miserable existence all over again. But Lisa, completely unaware of this, kept pressing her, asking if she now realized how amazing their family truly was. So the girl responded half-heartedly, "Oh, is that true? It's completely different from what I heard outside. I heard our family chops up disobedient servants." Lisa immediately grew flustered. "My lady, you mustn't listen to those scoundrels' nonsense." House Valois became one of the 4 great families purely through exceptional swordsmanship, and were even founding heroes of the empire. Most importantly, every direct heir is born with their own unique magic. We're an incredibly powerful house, so my lady, you should be proud of your family. Seeing Lisa's unwavering loyalty, the girl felt a wave of melancholy. If her father hadn't been so insanely obsessed with reviving her mother, maybe their family wouldn't have collapsed so easily. But was changing her father really such a simple task? After all, his obsession had already crossed into madness. Duke Bell, who had long resented her father, had also picked up on this. He'd always been jealous of the immense power held by House Valois' direct bloodline, and had been itching to bring them down. So when he learned that her father hadn't held a funeral for his wife, and had instead preserved her body with magic, he quickly came up with a wicked plan: to use the mother's body to push her father down a path of no return. Meanwhile, her father, keeping vigil beside his wife, had spent another night drinking, something the butler had long grown used to, silently offering him a glass of water while informing him Duke Bell had arrived. Still seeing his wife lying there, Duke Bell felt his skin crawl. "Forgive my bluntness, Duke, but how much longer do you plan on keeping the lady here?" Her father immediately bristled at the question. "Is there something wrong with keeping my wife by my side?" But soon after, remembering how his wife had loved sunlight and flowers, he decided to move her to the garden instead. After freshening up, her father went to meet Duke Bell. Seeing her father's still handsome face, Duke Bell froze. Wasn't this man supposed to be drowning himself in liquor day and night? Why did his skin look so good? Duke Bell then offered his condolences. "How have you been holding up? I heard the Duchess passed away. How are the funeral preparations coming along? The dead cannot be brought back. You should take care of your grief." Her father's face darkened instantly. "Didn't I already say there would be no funeral? And are you here to mock me? If that's the case, I wouldn't mind letting your wife see your corpse." Just as her father's magic was about to strike, Duke Bell hurriedly begged for mercy. "Please calm down, Duke. I came today to help you save the Duchess. But first, I must ask, are you willing to do anything for her? Faced with this question, her father answered without hesitation. He'd go through hell itself if it meant saving her. Seeing that he'd taken the bait, Duke Bell revealed his scheme. He intended to trick her father into seeking out a legendary dark mage, who could revive the dead through human sacrifice. Of course, her father, in his current state, wouldn't easily fall for such nonsense. But with nowhere else to turn, would he eventually walk that dark path out of sheer desperation? The reincarnation guide in this world turned out to be a little round black bird, and it told the girl that only by winning her father over with love could she change this tragic ending. From then on, even knowing how deranged her father was, the girl threw herself into it without hesitation. Not long ago, the wicked Duke Bell had tried to lure her father into seeking out the dark mage. Although her father hadn't agreed, he only grew more obsessed with finding a way to revive her mother, and ended up staying away from home for several days straight. Fortunately, the girl still had the servants to keep her company. The maids passionately put on puppet shows for her, but having lived through so many lifetimes already, she'd long lost interest in that sort of thing. Still, seeing their eager expressions, she did her best to play along. After all, her plan still needed their help going forward. After much thought, the girl realized changing her father wouldn't be easy, so she came up with a backup plan, running away to live a free life somewhere else. But that would require an emergency fund, one she'd need to quietly transfer out ahead of time. And for that, she'd need the maid's help. One day, when Lisa brought her a cream cake she loved, the girl blurted out that she wanted a cherry pie instead, only realizing afterward that her old bad habit from her past life had slipped out again. Back then, she'd constantly tormented Lisa with her whims, nearly driving the poor girl over the edge. If Lisa were in her shoes, she'd have poisoned her long ago. Thinking of this, she quickly took the cream cake and thanked Lisa, telling herself she needed to be more careful from now on. What the girl never expected, though, was that in this life, Lisa and the others adored her even more than before. Seeing how gloomy she looked one day, they quickly assumed the girl didn't like being surrounded by them all the time. So they devised a special plan, giving her some time alone to relax. But it backfired completely, leaving her feeling lonelier than ever. After days without a single servant approaching her, the girl couldn't help but burst into tears. But then she reminded herself no one would ever bother comforting a wicked villainess, so she forced herself to wipe the tears away. Just then, Lisa burst in out of nowhere and grabbed her hand. "My lady, no matter how sad you are, you mustn't hurt yourself." A crowd of servants suddenly flooded in after her, fussing over the girl until she was completely overwhelmed. It wasn't until Lisa announced, right in front of her, that the isolation plan was officially over, that she finally understood. They'd been doing this on purpose the whole time. But before she could think further, the doctor arrived. He gave her cheek a gentle pinch, and simply declared she was fine. This sent Lisa into a fury, and she forced him to run a much more thorough check. Only after the doctor repeatedly assured them the girl was perfectly healthy did they finally believe it. The girl never imagined that her sadness would get every single servant in the manor to drop their work just to check on her. This sudden outpouring of affection made her cheeks flush red without warning, which of course was caught by the sharp-eyed Lisa, who pressed the doctor for yet another exam. To save the poor man, the girl finally admitted the truth. Everyone burst into tears upon hearing it, deeply regretting that they hadn't noticed her loneliness sooner. To make it up to her, Lisa immediately gifted her a white cat plush. The girl felt a pang of guilt remembering how she'd torn apart a similar toy in her past life, and swore to cherish this one properly this time. Once everyone had left, she hugged the plush and drifted off to sleep. She never expected to be woken up by a tapping sound at her window in the middle of the night. Thinking it might be an assassin, she crept over cautiously to check, only to discover it was a talking little blackbird. The moment they met, it revealed her identity as a reborn soul. The girl studied it carefully, guessing it might be the legendary helper for reborn souls, B. Before she could think any further, Lisa suddenly snatched the bird away. The girl hadn't realized Lisa had been quietly watching over her deep into the night. Just as the bird was about to be tossed aside, the girl panicked and quickly explained that the bird, just like her cat plush, was one of her friends, and that she'd invited it to a secret gathering. Lisa's heart twisted with guilt at this, slamming herself hard into the nearby wall. She absolutely had to protect the girl's innocent heart. But she also really wanted to join in on this secret gathering, So she declared that from now on she'd wear an animal mask too and hold one together with the girl. With the girl's quiet approval, she skipped away joyfully. After Lisa left, the little bird went on, complaining nonstop to the girl. Fed up, she pulled out her treasured strawberry cake to appease it. The bird was dismissive at first, but soon dove straight into the cake. Once it had calmed down after finishing the cake, it showed her a letter written by the god. Apparently, this rebirth was a gift from the divine, meant to give her the chance to live the life she truly wanted, and the first step was changing her father's current state. The girl was utterly confused by the god's cryptic instructions, but by the time she looked up, the bird had already flown off, leaving her feeling helpless. She had no way of even seeing her father, so how was she supposed to change him? To reach her deranged father, the girl had no choice but to bring up her deceased mother, the one true love of his life. Surprisingly, this trick worked on him like magic. He not only sat down and had a meal with her, but cleared his entire plate. Even the head chef couldn't hold back tears of joy, remarking that the Duke hadn't eaten this much in a very long time. It truly seemed nothing could move him quite like the memory of his lost love. The next morning, Lisa woke the girl up early and dressed her formally. It turned out the doctor had secretly drawn her blood during his last checkup to run a paternity test, and it had now confirmed she truly carried the direct bloodline. Since her father would be returning today to confirm the results, Lisa made sure she was dressed and groomed early. Still, the girl knew this was all pointless. In her past life, she'd never once managed to share a meal with her father before dying, and even on the rare occasions there'd been a chance, he'd always cancel at the last minute. Yet the servants remained convinced he would show up this time, especially the blue-haired man standing nearby, her father's steward, Agatha, who also managed the estate's finances. Seizing the opportunity, the girl asked him when she could start receiving her allowance. Upon learning it would begin next month, she broke into a delighted grin. After all, House Valois' allowance was famously generous. She'd only need to save up for 3 months to afford a house, and then she could run away anytime she wanted. The thought brought a sly smile to her face. Agatha noticed the smile and thought it looked eerily like her father's, remarking on just how powerful genetics could be. The girl felt her face flush with embarrassment, but she quickly noticed something else off. Why did Agatha keep calling her kid? It felt oddly disrespectful. Agatha explained that he'd only start using her name once she was older. Furious, the girl decided that from then on, she'd call him Sweetheart in return, only for Agatha to declare that kid and sweetheart made the perfect pair. This absurd logic left her utterly speechless. Clearly, even the people around this madman weren't entirely normal. Just then, a servant rushed in and handed Agatha a letter. After reading it, he simply told her to start eating without waiting. No need to guess. Her father wasn't coming this time either. It seemed the same old fate from her past life was repeating itself. Changing her father really was too difficult. But the girl never expected the real turning point of this life to happen right after her nap. Waking from her sleep, she instinctively called out for Lisa, only to find her usually ever-present maid nowhere to be seen. The entire estate had gone eerily quiet, not a single servant in sight. After walking for a while, she finally found Lisa, her face etched with worry. The moment Lisa saw her, she panicked and tried to coax her back to bed for more sleep. But with the experience of countless past lives behind her, the girl knew something wasn't right. Sure enough, the next moment, she heard Agatha's voice reporting something to her father in the distance. Without hesitation, she ran straight toward the sound. Along the way, panicked servants tried to stop her, but her eyes were locked onto that one dark silhouette. Finally, she threw her arms around the figure, but when she slowly opened her eyes, she realized her whole body was somehow covered in blood, while her father stood there staring at her, looking like a demon fresh from hell. Startled by his appearance, she stumbled backward a few steps. Seeing this, her father immediately turned away, telling her to get out of his sight. But his hoarse voice made the girl realize something was wrong. Sure enough, the next moment, she noticed his eyes were red and swollen. Had he been crying? In her past life, she'd only ever known him as a madman obsessed with reviving her mother. She'd never once considered just how much pain and loneliness he must have felt after losing the one he loved. All he really wanted was for his beloved to return to his side. Yet along the way, he'd made countless mistakes and been endlessly misunderstood by the world. The thought filled her with an unexpected ache for him. This time, she decided she would be the one to change him. So she quickly called out to stop him as he tried to leave. Mother always said you should eat on time. If you don't eat properly, she'll worry about you. At the mention of her mother, a faint spark of light flickered in her father's eyes, and he ordered the chef to prepare food. And so, without any warning, the girl found herself sharing her first meal with her father across 2 lifetimes. She made a show of eating enthusiastically in front of him, telling him her mother had loved people who ate well. It worked wonders on him, except he seemed reluctant to touch the bread, finding it too much trouble to eat. So the girl pulled out her trump card. "Father, do you know how much effort went into getting this bread onto the table? If you don't eat it, they'll all be so sad. And I might just have to punish you." Her father froze at her exaggerated little gesture, memories surfacing of how her mother used to scold him the exact same way at the dinner table. Mother and daughter were shockingly alike. This made him ask how exactly her mother used to scold her over leftover food, and the girl pinched her own cheeks, claiming her mother pulled at them until they went thin. Hearing this, her father devoured the bread at lightning speed. "Judging by how you eat, your cheeks aren't going anywhere anytime soon. Now finish the rest slowly, make sure you eat it all." With that, he vanished from the room just as fast, leaving her standing there, utterly bewildered. Honestly, who eats a meal that fast? After his wife's death, he had slept beside her corpse every single night, living each day consumed by pain and regret. It wasn't until the day his long-neglected little daughter stood firmly in front of him, telling everyone that her father wasn't a monster, that something in the deepest, softest part of his heart was finally stirred. Not long ago, the girl had finally managed to share her first meal with her father, only for him to vanish the instant he finished eating. This left her thoroughly frustrated. At this rate, how long would it take to actually grow closer to him? Setting her father aside for now, this time around, her relationship with the servants was progressing surprisingly well, especially with Lisa, whose change was the most noticeable. She'd even started organizing secret animal-themed gatherings on her own initiative, even if the chattering got a bit loud. One time, surrounded by everyone fussing over her, the girl accidentally finished off all the snacks they'd brought. Lisa and the others immediately decided to fetch more. But the moment they left, her father suddenly appeared. Seeing her sitting there all alone, he moved to take her to eat, and just as she tried to explain that Lisa and the others would be right back, he simply said he'd deal with it properly later. Terrified for their sake, the girl desperately defended them, but her father merely remarked that she, like her mother, was far too kind. In the end, she was firmly ushered off to eat with him. While dining, she suddenly recalled how her co-workers back in her old life had once tried getting close to a villain to change their fate, and to her surprise, it had actually worked. After a fierce internal debate, she decided to try flirting with her father a little. "Father, this steak is delicious, and this strawberry cake is amazing too. Do you want to try some?" With that, she speared a piece of strawberry cake and eagerly held it up to his mouth. But her father merely responded coldly. "So, what exactly do you want from me?" What kind of blunt response was that? In that moment, a small girl's hopeful heart shattered just a little. Was one bite really that hard to ask for? She'd put so much effort into her little recommendation, yet no matter how enthusiastically she waved the cake in front of him, he simply wouldn't budge. He clearly had no idea what it meant to share a favorite food with someone. Did he think eating was simply just eating, nothing more? Disheartened, the girl let her head droop, and most of the cake on her fork tumbled to the floor. Seeing this, her father immediately ordered a servant to clean it up. Hearing this, the girl couldn't help but protest. "Why can't you understand? I gave you my favorite food, and you just coldly rejected me. Fine then, we don't have to eat together anymore." Seeing her wounded little expression, her father finally spoke up to explain himself. "I only wanted to eat with you because I care about you." It seemed refusing the cake was no longer an option, so he took the last bit of cake still on her fork and ate it, then carefully asked if she wanted any more. The girl declared this was more than enough. That day marked such a significant breakthrough in her relationship with her father that she found herself too excited to sleep that night, sneaking out to grab a snack instead. What she stumbled upon instead was a sight she'd never forget. Shattered debris scattered across her father's doorway, and inside he sat drenched in blood, weeping uncontrollably. It was in this moment that the girl truly understood just how fragile her father was without her mother. The next day, her father suddenly came down with a high fever, yet he still stubbornly insisted on going out, ignoring every attempt by the steward and the doctor to stop him. Realizing the girl might be the only one who could get through to him, Agatha rushed to find her. After hearing the full story, even knowing this might disrupt the plot, she agreed to go along with him anyway. When they finally reached her father, however, she didn't try to stop him the way Agatha had expected. Instead, she simply wished him a safe journey. As Agatha stood there utterly confused, the girl suddenly stepped in front of her father. Why try to stop him from leaving? He wasn't a monster. He simply missed her mother too much. With that, she gently took hold of his fingers. But father, you have to promise me, you'll eat and sleep properly. Only with a healthy body can you find a way to save mother. Looking at the small face so similar to his own, her father felt something in his chest soften completely. This child might share his looks, but her words and mannerisms were eerily like his wife's. It was only then that he truly woke up to the fact that he wasn't the only one who had lost her. His children had lost their mother too. Thinking back now, ever since bringing the girl home, he really had changed quite a bit. Even sparing children he came across outside who reminded him of her, finding them good families to be raised in instead. Maybe he thought this little girl truly was the greatest gift his wife had ever left him. Such a small presence? Yet she had quietly reshaped every part of who he was. After being scolded by a maid for being the worst father imaginable, the once feared demon spiraled into a full identity crisis, promptly pulling out books on child psychology to study obsessively, determined to become the perfect father. Recently, thanks to the girl's persuasion, her father finally stopped dragging his sick body out the door, and instead stayed home, spending several days by her side. The invisible wall between father and daughter seemed to crumble entirely that day, much to the relief of the entire household. One day, the doctor came to give the girl her routine checkup, and pulled out a growth tonic of his own special formula, gifting it to her. "Grow up to rule the empire, little one." The girl stared at his overly dramatic declaration, utterly baffled, until she happened to spot a copy of Child Psychology on his bookshelf. And suddenly everything clicked. Not wanting to disappoint the doctor, she played along and acted delighted, quickly winning him over completely. Just as the two of them were deep in conversation, Agatha suddenly rushed in and dropped to his knees. "My dear sister in arms, you'll always have my loyalty. That day you stopped the Duke just in time. Honestly, at first I resented you for not holding him back. But after hearing what you said, I realized we'd all been ignoring the Duke's feelings this whole time." Seeing him like this, the girl offered comfort. "Sweetheart, you're actually very precious to father too, you know. You've always worried about him." To her surprise, Agatha's eyes welled up with tears. "I don't think I even deserve to be his steward anymore." Just as he finished speaking, her father's furious voice rang out. "That's enough. What exactly are you doing in front of my child?" With that, he scooped the girl up, ready to head to lunch. Before leaving, he glanced down at Agatha, still kneeling on the floor. "Resigning over something this trivial? How disappointing. Take a few days off then." Before Agatha could even react, her father had already vanished with her at lightning speed. Once he'd recovered, Agatha shouted back loudly, "Duke, I'm willing to serve you for the rest of my life. You're the one who wouldn't let me resign. Don't you dare go back on it later." His voice was so loud it practically echoed through the entire estate, leaving her father thoroughly embarrassed. Afterward, father and daughter went to have lunch together. Out of nowhere, her father mentioned he'd heard there was an alchemist in town who could perform resurrection magic, and he decided to check it out today, though he'd be back before dinner. It seemed his obsession with reviving her mother still couldn't be shaken off so easily, but at least he was voluntarily reporting his whereabouts now, which was progress. The girl happily agreed. That night, she held her strawberry cake by the window as usual, eagerly waiting for the little bird to deliver its message. She'd lost count of how many days she'd been waiting like this. Was it because there were simply too many reborn souls needing help, and the bird was too busy to come? Just as she was about to give up, the bird's urgent voice suddenly rang out, "Don't throw that away. Isn't that meant for me?" With that, it dove straight into the cake, leaving the girl's face covered in cream. Fortunately, this time it had also brought a letter from the god, or else she might have plucked every last feather off it. This time, the god's instruction was for her to stop her father from going out again. Based on the pattern of these messages, it seemed the god's intention was for her to change the original storyline. But was that really okay? Lost in thought, she didn't even notice the bird calling out to her until it gave her head a sharp peck, snapping her back to reality. Suddenly, something occurred to her, and she looked at the bird earnestly. "Can you help deliver a reply for me?" The bird explained that, according to the rules, that wasn't allowed, and it couldn't reveal anything about who had sent the letter either. At that, the girl simply tore the letter apart right in front of it, an act so bold it left the bird utterly stunned. I've lived for hundreds of years, and this is the first time I've seen someone openly defy the rules like this. The girl's expression shifted at that. What kind of thing is that to say? Communication should go both ways. Since I can't send a reply, then I'll just have to communicate through my actions. Extras have rights too, you know. All I want to know is why I was reborn. And what all of this is for, is that really so wrong? I hope whoever sent this letter answers me soon. The bird, thoroughly infuriated by her stubbornness, snapped back. If the sender knew you were acting like this, they'd want to strangle you. And honestly, he already explained things clearly enough. Why can't you just understand? The bird's words struck a nerve, and the girl couldn't help but shout back. I've spent 100 lifetimes living in confusion, every single one of them as some villain's daughter. Do you have any idea how exhausting that kind of endless darkness is? The bird, clearly done listening, simply flapped its wings and flew off. Watching it disappear into the distance, the girl lowered her head quietly. I just wanted to find a way out of this mess, so Father wouldn't have to suffer so much anymore. Then, shouting after the bird's retreating shape, she called out, "You terrible bird! Next time bring money for the cake. I'm never buying you food again." The moment she finished speaking, she awkwardly realized her father had appeared right behind her at some point. Naturally, Lisa ended up on the receiving end of his lecture. He assumed the girl's strange habit of talking to birds must have come from Lisa's influence. And on top of that, he brought up how she'd once left the young girl alone in the garden, calling her an incompetent maid, completely unfit for the job. This struck a nerve with Lisa, and she immediately began firing back at him. I admit I haven't done a perfect job. But you're not exactly a model yourself, Duke. Drinking yourself into a stupor every night, never staying home, is that really what a responsible father looks like? By that logic, you're the worst father around, too. Seeing things spiral out of control, the girl tried to step in and calm things down, but Agatha quickly pulled her back. What followed left them all utterly stunned. Her father, of all people, had actually been rendered speechless by Lisa's words. The once legendary demon, completely defeated by a lowly little maid. Just because the girl casually mentioned wanting it, her father didn't hesitate for a second before reclaiming the entire Viscount's estate, turning the 5-year-old into an instant millionaire, who now spent her days happily swimming in wealth. Not long before, her father had been left utterly shattered by Lisa's blunt remark calling him the worst father in history, spiraling into deep self-doubt. So much so that even the girl couldn't stand to watch anymore. Toddling over on her little legs, she declared, "Why would you two say such hurtful things to each other? Don't you realize you're the people I love most? Lisa, you've already done more than enough, honestly. I sometimes think being my maid is a waste of your talents." Lisa, hearing this, only grew more upset. "But my lady, I want to take care of you forever." Seeing the situation wasn't improving, the girl redirected her efforts toward her father instead. As for Father, I think he's amazing too. He eats every single meal with me, every day. That remark nearly shattered him on the spot. Is that really all I've managed to do for my daughter? If her mother knew, she'd surely be disappointed in me. Just as the girl was trying to figure out how to comfort the two dejected adults, a guard suddenly burst in, urgently reporting to her father. "Duke, if you have a moment, please come to the dungeon right away." Her father immediately grabbed her and rushed off without hesitation, leaving the girl thoroughly bewildered. Unsure why he'd suddenly bring her to such a grim place. Perhaps he still hadn't fully recovered from earlier. Soon after, her father covered her eyes and ordered the guard to explain what had happened. It turned out the Viscount, after 4 months locked in the dungeon, had finally gone completely mad and viciously beaten Jian, which was what had finally caught the guard's attention. The girl was disgusted by this, especially once she learned the victim was Jian, and her fury flared instantly. Her father was equally outraged. He'd clearly ordered Jian to be sent for treatment, so how had he ended up locked in the dungeon instead? After questioning the guards, it turned out to be their own negligence, and her furious father was ready to punish them severely. But the girl knew Jian's condition mattered more right now, so she urged her father to get him treated first. After she reminded him how much he loved helping others, her father finally shook off his gloom and immediately ordered Jian to be sent for treatment. With Jian settled, it was time to deal with the Viscount. Recalling how this man had once tormented his wife and daughter, her father found himself agreeing wholeheartedly with the girl's earlier suggestion, deciding to torture him finger by finger, just as she'd proposed. Father and daughter, both equally ruthless, very nearly scared the Viscount into wetting himself. but the girl knew that simply killing him would be letting him off too easy. So she quickly stopped her father. Just as the guards assumed she must be too soft-hearted to watch an execution, her next words left them all speechless instead. If he dies, what happens to his assets? He still owes me for so much unpaid work. Scrubbing floors, cleaning toilets, ironing clothes, taking out the trash. After everything I've done for his household, he hasn't paid me a single coin. Hearing this, her father's expression darkened by the second, and he immediately ordered Agatha to transfer every last asset under the Viscount's name over to the girl. A month later, Black Panther banners representing House Valois had gone up across the Viscount's former territory, a clear announcement of his death to the world. Upon hearing the news, the Viscountess had no choice but to flee. She'd warned her unfortunate husband time and again not to underestimate a fallen duchess, yet he'd never listened, and now their whole family had paid the price. If their darker business dealings were ever exposed, escaping punishment would be even harder, so she rushed to flee before House Valois' people arrived. Just as she was scrambling to get everything in order, a man in black suddenly showed up demanding Xian's slave documents. Watching him snatch the file away, she actually felt relieved. That paperwork had become quite the liability for her anyway. Meanwhile, news that House Valois had reclaimed the Viscount's estate quickly spread to the other noble families. Upon hearing that her father had handed all of the Viscount's assets over to a mere 5-year-old, the family heads could barely contain their unease. But given her father's overwhelming power, none of them dared to voice their objections outright. All they could do was wait for the periodic council meeting to confirm whether the rumors were true. The problem was that Madman hadn't attended a single meeting in 5 years, not since his wife walked out on him. And now, busy chasing after ways to revive her, it seemed unlikely he'd show up this year either. Duke Bell, growing increasingly irritated as he listened, couldn't stand how much attention everyone kept giving to such a teetering family, so he volunteered to go confirm the situation himself, instantly becoming everyone's hero at the gathering. Elsewhere, the man in black showed the stolen slave documents to a certain woman. She said she wasn't ready to take possession of it just yet, and told him to keep holding on to it, then asked if he had any fresh information. The man reported that her father's recent strange behavior all seemed to be connected to the girl, and that he could handle it any time if needed. But the woman told him to wait and watch for now. She was curious to see how things would unfold with Xian. Meanwhile, Xian entered a long recovery period after being sent for treatment. Much to the girl's relief, she had no intention of losing the very first friend she'd made. Just then, Lisa came rushing over, lugging a large sack, asking if she was ready. At the sight of the bag in Lisa's hands, the girl lit up with excitement and eagerly told her to bring it on. Lisa then began scattering handfuls of gold coins everywhere, and the girl happily lost herself in the sea of wealth, utterly unable to resist. Everything really was heading in the right direction now. Maybe she'd soon have enough money saved to leave. Then again, perhaps she could also try preventing her father from ever meeting the Queen, or ease his obsession with the Queen's holy power. Could that let their whole family finally live happily together? Just as she was lost in thought, Lisa and Agatha suddenly startled her awake. Lisa, pinching her fingers shyly, asked, "My lady, do you like the white cat plush I gave you better, or money better?" Knowing full well that saying money would hurt Lisa's feelings, the girl still refused to lie and awkwardly admitted she actually preferred money. Agatha, overhearing this, eagerly jumped in. "Then between me and money, little sister, which do you like more?" Seeing how eager he looked, she bluntly told him she preferred money too. Then her father joined the game as well. "And between your father and money, which do you prefer?" Under the pull of blood ties, the girl didn't hesitate, declaring she preferred her father, only for him to tap her little nose and tell her she'd gotten it wrong. "Silly girl, the correct answer is both." To keep her father from falling completely into darkness, the girl had meant to stop him from going to the islands to meet the Queen, but he slipped away without a word while she wasn't looking, causing her plan to fail before it even began. Still, there were 14 years left before the family's destruction, so no matter what, she had to find a solution within that time. Not long before, her relationship with her father had made significant progress, and his transformation had started to make the girl waver, even considering giving up on her escape plan, altogether in favor of simply changing him instead. Still, she remained torn between the two choices, and so she found herself in a dream, holding counsel with the little voices inside her head. One version of herself, with a single ponytail, insisted they should respect the original story. After all, they were professional background characters, and not interfering with the plot was basic professionalism. But her other self, with twin ponytails, argued that being so rigid was pointless. This unexpected rebirth was clearly a gift from the god. And besides, if they'd truly made a mistake, they wouldn't have gone 5 whole months without punishing her, let alone sending the little bird to guide her. And could she really bring herself to abandon everything here and walk away without a second thought? Could she really bear to watch House Valois fall to ruin again? The single ponytail self immediately protested, but soon found herself agreeing with the twin ponytail self's reasoning. In the end, all 3 versions of herself struck an agreement. They would stay and protect everyone. The true root of what would eventually send her father spiraling into darkness was his meeting with the holy powered queen on the islands. So the girl resolved that no matter what, she had to stop him from going there. But at that very moment, while she was still deep in her dream council, her father had already packed up and was ready to head to the islands. Before leaving, he made a special trip to see her one last time, and seeing her small hand clutching his so tightly, refusing to let go, his heart melted completely. He even considered simply taking her along with him. If not for the guards repeatedly warning him how brutal the island's environment truly was, he might well have gone through with such a reckless idea. In the end, he reluctantly prepared to depart for the islands anyway. Before leaving, he instructed Agatha to take good care of the girl during this time, told him he'd be back in about 3 weeks, then turned and left without looking back. The next day, now that her goal was clear, the girl woke up bursting with energy. Seeing Lisa, she ran straight into her arms. "Lisa, I know you can be a bit naggy sometimes, but you're still an important part of my family, and I'll always look out for you." Hearing herself called family, Lisa was so moved she nearly burst into tears, immediately pulling the girl into a bone-crushing hug. On the way to breakfast afterward, every single servant in the manor greeted her warmly, filling her with an almost giddy sense of joy. This kind of life, so much like being the protagonist, was really quite wonderful. She even went out of her way to pick some pretty flowers from the garden to give to her father. But by the time she reached the dining hall, she found Agatha looking utterly exhausted instead. When she asked what was wrong, he simply explained he hadn't slept well the night before. And to his surprise, she immediately offered him reassurance that everything would be fine. Being comforted by a 5-year-old for the first time left him deeply touched. But he quickly grew anxious again, unsure how to break the news of her father's departure to her. Sure enough, the next moment, as she sat down to eat, she asked about her father's whereabouts. And upon learning he'd not only gone to the islands, but wouldn't be back for another 3 weeks, the girl nearly fainted on the spot. She'd only just promised her sisters yesterday that she'd stop him from going. And now, before her plan could even begin, it had already fallen apart. A devastating blow. She theatrically fainted right then and there, sending Lisa and the others scrambling to call the doctor. Just as she was cursing her father for sneaking off without a word, the doctor declared there was nothing seriously wrong with her. She just needed a few days of rest, which only made her angrily accuse him of being a quack. "Doctor, you clearly don't understand. This is a psychological illness. I'm very disappointed in you." The doctor, hearing this, began questioning his entire career. From that day on, the girl refused to speak to anyone for several days straight, no matter how the maids tried to coax her out of it. Perhaps time truly was the best medicine for a wounded heart, because by the 4th day, the girl had fully calmed down and was back to showing off her strawberry cake again. After all, thinking it over carefully, they hadn't even reached the true endgame yet. There were still a full 14 years before her family's destruction, and she refused to believe she couldn't find a solution within that time. It was then that she overheard the maids chatting outside her door, delighted that she was finally eating again, though also keeping an almost obsessive watch over her every move. Suddenly, one maid quietly asked Lisa whether they should update the girl about Xian, whispering so as not to be overheard. The girl immediately pushed the door open and asked how Xian was doing, urging Lisa to take her to see him right away. After being unconscious for so long, Xian finally woke up, only to be stunned to discover that the once similarly pitiful little girl he'd known had transformed into the beloved daughter of the Devil Duke himself. And strangely enough, she was treating him even better than before. Not long ago, upon learning from the maids about Xian's condition, the girl had immediately insisted Lisa take her to see him. But from what the maids had reported earlier, his condition didn't sound good, leaving her more than a little worried. When she finally arrived at his room, the maids looked at her as though she were their last hope, urging her to help talk some sense into him. Once she saw the situation for herself, she finally understood what was going on. Xian, now awake, simply refused to eat anything, no matter how the maids tried to persuade him. Without proper nutrition, there was no way he'd recover quickly, which left the maids at their wits' end. Suddenly, one of them noticed the girl peeking in from the doorway, and the moment Jian heard her name, a faint spark lit up in his eyes. "Is that really you?" The girl smiled helplessly at him. "It's really me. Now you'd better eat properly, and as a patient, you shouldn't be standing around either. Come on, sit down." Xian, however, refused her request, his expression turning serious. "I know you're a slave just like me. Don't tell me you were brought here by that madman too." As he spoke, a sharp pain shot through his wound, nearly making him collapse. Yet he still gripped her shoulders tightly, urging her to run. "You need to get out of here right now. The master of this house is a well-known monster." Even though she already knew her own father's reputation wasn't great, hearing it stated so bluntly from Xian's own mouth still stung a little. Still, she had no intention of keeping the truth from him, and promptly sent the maids out of the room. Seeing them treat her with such deference, Xian seemed to piece something together. "So you're the young lady of House Valois. Why did it have to be you?" Puzzled by his despondent expression, the girl replied, "That's right, I really am the daughter of the man who owns this place. I'm actually the one who asked father to have you treated. And there's no need for formal speech between us. Just be as comfortable as you like." No matter how she tried to persuade him, though, Xian insisted on continuing to address her formally. And irritated, she wanted to properly argue the point with him, only to have him deliberately dodge her outstretched hand. Could it be that he despised her simply for being her father's daughter? Just like all those noble young ladies from her past life who'd only pretended to be her friends. None of them actually wanted her company. They'd simply had to tolerate her because of her status. And now, it seemed, even her first friend of this life was turning out to be just the same. Thinking this over, she decided not to press Jian any further, and instead had Lisa bring in a proper meal. She told him he had to finish eating before he could receive treatment, but Jian protested that he couldn't possibly accept such an extravagant meal. The girl reassured him she wouldn't ask for any payment, and once his treatment was complete, he'd be free to leave whenever he wished. All she really wanted was for him to properly heal. Seeing her sincere expression, Jian finally agreed to eat, though he refused the expensive steak, asking only for some plain wheat bread instead. Surprised by how stubborn he could be, the girl warned that if he didn't eat, she'd simply have to throw away the 3 gold coin steak. After all, no one would want to eat a slave's leftovers. The mention of the steak's steep price finally made him waver, though he still had one embarrassing problem left. He had no idea how to actually eat steak. Astonished that he didn't even know this much, the girl speared a piece of beef with her fork and told him to open his mouth. Xian was reluctant at first, but her sheer enthusiasm left him no choice but to accept being fed. Once she'd successfully gotten him to eat the steak, the girl felt quite pleased with herself and held up her little finger, proposing an agreement. "From now on, whenever it's just the two of us, no more formal speech. Deal?" Determined to change her family's tragic fate, the 5-year-old girl decided to sneak out in the middle of the night to destroy an important document, only to be betrayed by a maid she'd trusted day and night, resulting in her getting caught red-handed by Agatha. Not long before, thanks to the girl's gentle encouragement, Xian had finally started eating properly again, though he'd developed quite the fondness for chocolate croissants, requesting them from the maids at every meal. Upon hearing this from Lisa, the girl felt a wave of embarrassment. The very first time she'd shown him kindness had been with a croissant, and now he seemed unable to stop craving them. Could it be he'd developed an addiction to them? Why else would he want them at every single meal? She almost regretted not offering him something else that first time. Still, given how frail he'd looked back then, like he might collapse if he didn't eat something right away, she'd had no other choice but to offer up the croissant as an emergency fix. Seeing her troubled expression, Lisa suggested they go check on Jian later. But thinking of how sensitive he'd seemed, the girl decided against it, figuring he probably needed some time alone to come to terms with everything. Still, Xian's reaction the day before had been rather strange. Most people, upon learning someone was of noble birth, would be too intimidated to even look them in the eye. Yet Xian had frozen for a moment upon learning she was the young lady, then asked with obvious melancholy why it had to be her of all people. He didn't seem afraid of nobility at all, so why react that way? Or maybe she was simply overthinking it, and Jean just had some personal trauma related to nobles specifically. Just as she sat lost in thought, a sudden crack of thunder rumbled outside, followed by a torrential downpour. Lisa immediately pulled her into a tight embrace. "Oh, our young lady must be so scared. Don't worry, I'm right here with you." Seeing Lisa's overly enthusiastic reaction, the girl felt utterly drained. But the rainy weather also stirred memories of what had happened in her past life. The next moment, she spotted Agatha's silhouette through a crack in the door. In her previous life, the family's downfall had begun with Agatha. So even though she hadn't managed to stop her father this time, she was determined to prevent the disaster looming over the family. So she and Lisa arranged for Lisa to lure Agatha away at 2 a.m, giving her the chance to sneak into the office and deal with the documents. Because she was still trapped in a child's body, she nearly overslept. But fortunately, realizing just how serious the situation was, she managed to shake off her drowsiness in time. Just then, the paper mouse Lisa had left behind suddenly began to move. The signal they'd agreed on. Once the paper mouse moved, it meant it was safe to proceed. So the girl quietly slipped over to the office door. Sure enough, the room was completely empty, and the girl couldn't help but silently praise Lisa's efficiency. If everything went according to plan, she'd have to properly reward Lisa afterward. Just like that, she made her way into the office without any trouble. But disaster struck while pulling documents from a drawer. The stack proved too heavy, and she lost her balance, sending papers scattering everywhere across the floor. Even in the mess, she pressed on until she finally found what she was looking for. The record of how 2 years earlier, the Dolo Kingdom had gone to war with the Empire over disputed territory. House Valois had represented the Empire in that war, and her father had won without breaking a sweat. Afterward, the Dolo Kingdom became a vassal state of the Empire, and its half-blooded prince, Peter, had been sent as a hostage. Now the Dolo Kingdom had suddenly gone silent, and House Valois believed it was time to cut off their financial aid entirely. It was precisely this decision that would eventually earn them Peter's undying resentment, and years later, once he became emperor, he would turn his wrath squarely on House Valois, ultimately bringing about their complete destruction. Realizing this, the girl immediately reached to tear up the wretched proposal. But the very next moment, Agatha appeared right behind her, nearly frightening the soul out of her. Fortunately, she recovered quickly and shouted for the guards, only to see Lisa come rushing in instead. Could it be Agatha's sudden appearance was because of Lisa? Wasn't Lisa supposed to be on her side? Agatha explained that, in truth, they were both on her side as the adults in her life. It was simply their duty to guide and educate her properly. Hearing his nonsense, the girl couldn't help but bite him hard out of frustration, then eagerly turned to hear what Lisa really thought about all this. But to her dismay, Lisa's answer matched Agatha's exactly, leaving her utterly heartbroken. "Even you're abandoning me now, Lisa?" Lisa's heart twisted with guilt at hearing this, and she simply muttered a quiet, "I'm sorry," before rushing off. The girl had raided the office at night in a desperate attempt to save her family, tearing up the crucial proposal only to be caught red-handed by Agatha. Fortunately, he didn't scold her harshly, and instead calmly walked her through the pros and cons of the situation. Still, thanks to Lisa's tattling, her plan had failed at the very last step, leaving her thoroughly frustrated. But with nothing more than the body of a 5-year-old to work with, she stood no chance against Agatha, and had no choice but to surrender. Seeing her pitiful, wronged expression, Agatha gently coaxed her. "Little sister, why are you crying? I remember you as someone far tougher than this. Is there a specific reason you were so desperate to destroy that proposal?" Hearing his words, the girl gripped the hem of her dress tightly. She desperately wanted to tell him that the half-blooded Dolo prince currently held hostage would one day become emperor. But she knew she couldn't risk revealing spoilers like that. It could completely derail the entire storyline. Seeing her so conflicted, Agatha assumed she simply wanted some paper to play with but felt too embarrassed to ask, and promptly pulled out a fresh sheet from the drawer to hand to her. Seeing how thoughtful he was being toward her, the girl felt a wave of guilt. After all, she'd lived through 99 lifetimes already. Why was she still acting so childish? Noticing her mood had suddenly dipped, Agatha immediately held the proposal back up for her to see. "If you don't want to play with paper, then which word on here don't you like?" Seeing the proposal again made the girl's frustration flare right back up. Agatha, startled by her reaction, realized she genuinely disapproved of their family cutting off aid to the Dolo Kingdom. Watching his utterly disbelieving expression, she felt a wave of helplessness. He probably assumed she was simply being unreasonable, but to her surprise, his next words reignited her hope. "Why didn't you tell me about this before?" The girl immediately asked what telling him could possibly change. Agatha explained that the council meeting would still proceed as scheduled, But he would make sure everyone knew this was something the direct heir of House Valois personally opposed, and that she would attend the meeting herself to make her case. Still, the other family heads would likely raise objections, so how exactly would she handle that? Hearing this, the girl suddenly felt a deep sense of shame. If she couldn't offer the family heads a reasonable explanation, she'd simply come across as unreasonable. And worse, she'd end up branded a wicked villainess all over again, sealing her fate for good. It seemed her little scheme had been far too reckless after all. Seeing that she'd finally understood the full weight of the situation, Agatha comforted her gently. Everyone makes mistakes while growing up. What matters is that you're willing to learn and improve. That still makes you a good child. Still, he couldn't help but wonder how exactly she'd known about this proposal in the first place. Sensing danger, the girl tried to play dumb, but Agatha pointed out that the elaborate plan she and Lisa had come up with made it seem as though she'd known about the proposal long before it was even drafted. Could it be that she was some kind of legendary prophet? Completely thrown off by his outlandish theory, the girl's mind went blank for a second before she decided to simply play along with it, which left Agatha even more impressed with her than before. Watching how easily he'd been fooled, she couldn't help but feel a fresh wave of concern for her family's future. After talking things through with Agatha the night before, the girl deeply reflected on her mistake and went to apologize to the guards and maids who'd been on duty that night. But before long, she noticed a growing crowd of curious onlookers gathering, and upon closer inspection, discovered it was Agatha, enthusiastically inviting the servants to come watch her apologize, leaving her thoroughly annoyed enough to tell him to knock it off. Just then, she spotted Jian secretly watching from a distance. Could it be that seeing her apologize like this had made him lower his guard a little? With that in mind, she immediately asked Agatha to keep letting her continue apologizing, but he claimed he'd already had his fill of entertainment for the day. And with no crowd left to watch anyway, it had gotten boring, so he decided to retreat for now. Furious at his attitude, the girl's outburst ended up scaring Jian away as well, leaving her with absolutely no way to explain herself to him now. The girl had finally found a chance to grow closer to Xian, only to have Agatha completely ruin it, leaving her thoroughly embarrassed in front of him. Not long ago, frustrated after being teased by Agatha, she'd lost her temper, and unfortunately, Xian had witnessed the whole thing. Scared, he'd immediately fled the scene. Desperate to explain herself, the girl chased after him, but he ran surprisingly fast, so she kicked off her little shoes and sprinted after him with everything she had. Xian, please listen to me. That was all a misunderstanding earlier. Let's just talk properly. The servants watched their little chase with amusement, and the knights even offered to help catch Xian for her, but she quickly refused, telling them not to interfere. Just as she was about to finally catch up to him, she remembered how he didn't like being touched, and immediately stopped in her tracks, deciding to approach him more gently instead. So she called out to him, Xian, can I grab your hand? If you don't say anything, I'll take that as a yes. With that, she reached out and grabbed his hand. Got you, now let's talk properly. But before Xian could even respond, she tripped over her sock and fell. Strangely, the pain she braced for never came. Instead, she found herself caught in a warm embrace. Seeing Xian collapsed on the ground in pain, she scrambled to get up in a panic, and he suddenly asked her, If I hadn't told you not to touch me earlier, would you really not have grabbed my hand? Hearing this, she smiled with relief. Of course, I just wanted to clear up the misunderstanding. But upon seeing her smile, Xian's expression shifted sharply. Then, I was wrong. I should have made it clear I didn't want that. Please don't ever make that kind of expression again. It doesn't suit House Valois at all. Hearing this, the girl felt her spirits sink, so Xian really did despise their family after all. But what exactly could be the reason behind such deep resentment? Her father had never even done anything to him, it just didn't add up. Just as she was about to properly question him, Agatha suddenly lifted her up. So this is where you've been hiding, little sister. Ugh, Agatha had ruined her chance again. Being seen like this in front of Xian was mortifying. Especially with him staring at her so intently, it made her feel even more embarrassed. Just then, Lisa and the others arrived as well, and upon hearing she'd tripped over her sock, Lisa immediately started fussing over the sock itself, until a nearby attendant reminded her that the girl mattered far more than the sock right now, finally making Lisa stop. Agatha then prepared to carry her to the infirmary, and before leaving, she made sure to remind Xian, Xian, you'll be getting treatment again in a bit. And by the way, I'm not usually like this. Once things settle down, I'll come find you. Just wait for me, okay? After seeing the doctor and returning to her room, the girl couldn't help but pound her pillow in frustration, all because of that infuriating Agatha interrupting her again. She just wanted to grow closer to Xian. Why did it have to be so difficult? Still, thinking back on Xian's behavior earlier, could it really be because she was part of House Valois that he resented her so much? If that was the reason, it would be a real problem. Lost in thought, the girl suddenly found herself wide awake, so she went to find Lisa for some late-night snacks instead. After enjoying a delicious strawberry cake, she felt like herself again. Still, she hadn't forgotten to ask Lisa for advice. Lisa, is making friends really this exhausting? Lisa thought it over for a moment. If you want friends, my lady, you could always join high society. Plenty of people would be lining up to be your friend. But having already lived through one lifetime, the girl knew all too well that those kinds of friendships were nothing but hollow pretense. Still, there was one thing that nagged at her. Could a noble lady and a slave ever really become good friends? Lisa found herself at a loss over the question. As far as she knew, that sort of thing only happened in romance novels. The remark struck a nerve. After all, this whole world was essentially a novel to the girl. Suddenly, something occurred to her, and she darted over to the bookshelf, pulling out a red-covered book, then excitedly begged Lisa to lend it to her. Lisa took one look at the cover and went pale, but in the end, she couldn't refuse the girl and reluctantly agreed. To grow closer to Xian, the girl decided to invite him to lunch together, but the plan nearly backfired entirely. Not long before, in an attempt to salvage her image in front of Xian, she'd sought Lisa's help, during which she'd taken interest in a particular book on Lisa's shelf and immediately asked to borrow it. Lisa took one glance at the title and went pale, quickly swapping it out for a fairy tale instead. My lady, I think you'd enjoy this one much more. It's the story of a lion princess and a rabbit baron overcoming the gap between their stations. I really think this book will help you. So, book in hand, the girl pestered Agatha into reading it aloud to her the very next day, and to her surprise, she found herself completely swept up in the story, especially the part where the lion princess declared she'd happily give up meat forever for the rabbit baron she loved. With Agatha's dramatic narration adding to the effect, everything suddenly clicked into place. The leads of this story were practically a mirror of her and Xian. If she could follow the lion princess's example, lowering herself to blend into his world, wouldn't that help them grow close much faster too? With that thought in mind, she immediately got up to bid Agatha farewell. Goodbye, sweetheart. I'm off to eat some hay. After all, I'm a lion now. Before Agatha could even process what she'd said, she'd already dashed off, leaving him standing there utterly bewildered. He'd wanted to warn her that lions eating grass would just end up with an upset stomach. But the girl had no interest in hearing his little science lesson. She was already running straight for Xian's room, and happened to bump right into his maid along the way. Upon learning she was looking for Xian, the maid immediately offered to call him out, but the girl declined her help. Through the doorway, she saw him quietly gazing out the window, sunlight falling across his youthful face, subtly highlighting features that seemed a touch too refined. This couldn't possibly just be some ordinary slave. Just as she stood there lost in thought, Xian noticed her. What are you doing here? By the way, are you doing all right these past few days? Being dragged off so roughly by the servants that day, even losing your sock in the process. The mention of that day stung, but she brushed it off. I'm fine. That day was my own fault anyway. Xian pressed further, asking why she'd been apologizing that day in the first place. But partway through, he seemed to catch himself, realizing they weren't quite that close yet, and awkwardly looked away instead. Unable to stand his hesitation any longer, the girl finally spoke up. Actually, the reason I was apologizing that day was because I'd tried to destroy some confidential family documents. And then the next day, I ended up causing that whole scene with you too, a slave. Maybe I was just born reckless. Hearing her admit to her own mischief so shamelessly left Xian utterly stunned. He'd never met anyone quite so thick-skinned before. But the girl didn't seem bothered by any of it, and instead warmly invited him to join her for lunch. Xian stared at her bright smile in disbelief. Are you sure it's fine for you to keep hanging around me? Won't the Duke scold you for it? You might turn into a bad kid. At that, the girl grabbed hold of him firmly. Listen here, Xian, getting scolded and turning into a bad kid are two completely different things. Even if I keep doing what I'm doing, it doesn't necessarily mean I'll become a bad person. So don't worry about all that, just come have lunch with me. Hearing her words, Xian's face flushed bright red. It was the first time anyone had ever told him something like that. She really was a strange one. During lunch, in an attempt to carry out her plan, the girl deliberately chose the same whole wheat bread as Jian, though it turned out to be quite bland. Fortunately, he'd already finished his portion, so she then had dessert brought out. Just as Lisa expected her to order her beloved strawberry cake, the girl instead uncharacteristically requested the palace's signature specialty dessert. Lisa was horrified and quickly questioned her about it. After all, serving something so extravagant to a slave seemed completely absurd, but the girl refused to let her interrupt the plan. And in the end, a reluctant Lisa prepared 2 servings of the dessert. Xian, this isn't because I actually wanted to eat this. I'm doing it so I can better understand our rabbit friend, so let's enjoy this together. Before Jian could even ask what rabbit friend meant, his sharp eyes caught sight of the chocolate topping on the dessert she was about to eat, and he immediately tried to jump up to stop her. But the moment he moved, the knights swarmed and surrounded him, swords raised at him from every direction, while Agatha, standing protectively beside the girl, snarled at Jian, I don't believe the master gave you permission to stand. Because of the girl's promise to protect him, Shen, who had never once felt genuine care from anyone, was deeply moved, even beginning to develop a wish to stay by her side forever. Not long before, worried she was about to accidentally eat chocolate, Shen, desperate to save her, had jumped up without thinking, only to be mistaken by the knights as attempting a rebellion. But in truth, the reason he'd reacted so strongly to the chocolate had everything to do with a small, well-meaning lie the girl had told him earlier. Back when they first met, hoping to spare him any sense of obligation over accepting the croissant, she'd casually claimed to be allergic to chocolate herself. She never imagined that offhand comment would stick so firmly in his mind, nearly getting him skewered by the knights as a result, which left the girl overwhelmed with guilt. It's all right, thanks to Xian, I nearly lost my life just now, so everyone please put your weapons down. And after all, before being a slave, Xian was still a child first, and deserved protection just like anyone else. Though the knights remained a little suspicious about her supposed chocolate allergy, they quietly lowered their swords and roughly tossed Xian aside, sternly warning him never to act on his own like that again. In truth, even Xian himself didn't fully understand why he'd acted so instinctively. Some part of him, deep down, simply hadn't wanted the girl to get hurt. Just then, the purple necklace he always carried suddenly began to vibrate. It belonged to the woman who had originally purchased him for 5,000 gold coins, and she was calling. Though he had no desire to speak with her, he knew better than to arouse her suspicion. So a moment later, he quietly answered. When she asked how things were going at House Valois, he replied that nothing unusual had happened yet, and that he'd continue observing. Then, remembering what the girl had said earlier, he found himself asking the woman whether it was really true that children deserved protection. The woman simply responded coldly, asking if he expected to be treated that way himself. Startled, Xian immediately apologized, but she waved it off, curious instead where he'd heard such a phrase. Upon learning it came from the young lady of House Valois, the woman grew visibly puzzled. Hadn't rumors placed the girl in a separate residence somewhere? Why was she actually living inside the estate itself? And from the tone in Jian's voice, it was clear he'd already grown quite fond of her. So the woman decided that, during the upcoming council meeting, she would rescue Xian while also taking the girl along with her. Hearing this, Xian's heart soared with excitement. If he could stay by the girl's side forever, he thought he might actually be happy. But he had no idea that the girl herself had already begun to suspect his true identity. How could an ordinary slave possibly know what filling was inside such an expensive dessert? And the natural elegance in the way he carried himself simply didn't match a slave's background at all. So who exactly was he really? With that in mind, the girl decided to ask Agatha to look into it. But the moment she walked in, she found him slumped lifelessly over his desk, and panicked, immediately wanting to call for the doctor. Fortunately, Agatha stopped her in time, explaining that with her father away, he'd been forced to handle even more work than usual, leaving him more exhausted than ever. Seeing his heavy dark circles, the girl felt too guilty to ask him for another favor, and instead simply urged him to get some proper rest before turning to leave. But Agatha called her back. My dear little prophet, I'd like to talk with you properly about the council meeting. First, I need to confirm whether you truly possess the gift of foresight before I can let you attend. The girl tensed at his words. It seemed Agatha had already secured her father's approval to hold the council meeting, which meant his decision now directly affected their family's future. Very well then, go ahead and test me. So Agatha posed his first question. Who will my future wife be? The girl's heart sank instantly. She strongly suspected he was simply using this for his own personal gain. Honestly, she wasn't some fortune teller. How was she supposed to know who his future wife would be? Well, in that case, it was time to teach this man a lesson. So she put on a dramatic performance. I can see your future wife. It's... strange. Why is it a man? Oh, it seems our dear sweetheart is destined to have quite the dashing husband instead. How wonderful. Agatha looked as though he'd been struck by lightning, wishing he could simply drop dead on the spot. Well, serves him right for asking such a ridiculous question. Just as the girl turned to leave, Agatha grabbed tightly onto her ankle. I'm sorry, my lady, that was all just a joke. Now for the real question. When exactly will your two older brothers be returning? The girl froze at the question. This one clearly worked in Agatha's favor. After all, he kept meticulous track of every single House Valois family member's schedule. But no matter how well-informed he was, could he ever really compete with someone who'd already lived through this life once before? Without missing a beat, she told him, My brothers were originally supposed to return in a year, but due to some incident, they'll now be back within a month. And the Academy should send word about it in roughly a week. Impressed by how detailed and confident her answer sounded, Agatha found himself momentarily flustered. Seeing this, the girl offered him one more prophecy, telling him that in a week's time, Lisa would head out carrying 2 swords. Agatha remained visibly skeptical about this one, but the girl felt completely confident, certain that once he saw every single prophecy come true, he'd fall in line and follow her without question. Not long before, the girl had confided in Agatha about certain events that would unfold in the future, admitting candidly that her foresight only extended to what would happen up until she turned 19. This only deepened Agatha's curiosity about just what kind of future she actually knew. She refused to reveal the details outright. After all, that terrifying future was practically the stuff of her own nightmares. Watching her expression turn grave, Agatha felt a knot form in his chest. And combining it with how desperately she'd once tried to destroy that document, he suddenly had a realization. Could House Valois be facing some kind of catastrophic crisis? And since she couldn't see anything past 19, was that the reason she'd been so desperate to change the future? Seeing that Agatha had finally grasped the depth of her concern, the girl immediately invited him to join her in defending the family. And as the very first step of this defense campaign, she promptly devoured 3 strawberry cakes in a row, and just as she reached for a 4th, Lisa finally reached her breaking point, furiously confronting Agatha. Why are you letting my lady run wild like this? If she keeps eating like that, it'll ruin her health. To her surprise, Agatha calmly told her that the girl surely had her reasons, and the girl herself simply added that a few extra strawberry cakes certainly wouldn't kill her. Watching the two of them play off each other so smoothly left Lisa utterly infuriated, and she stormed off without so much as a backward glance. Watching Lisa's retreating figure, the girl couldn't help but feel a bit helpless herself. In truth, the only reason Agatha listened to her so obediently was because of that earlier prophecy coming true. The one about Lisa had admittedly been fabricated. Fortunately, he hadn't caught on, though sometimes he wasn't quite so easy to fool either. Once Lisa had left, he turned to her with a perfectly serious expression. Are you really eating all that strawberry cake for the good of the family? The girl, having already prepared her excuse, replied smoothly, Of course, sweetheart. I am the direct heir of House Valois, after all. My happiness is the family's happiness. Agatha considered this for a moment, then snatched away her 4th slice of cake entirely. Well then, since you've sacrificed so many slices of cake for the happiness of House Valois, perhaps you should also brush your teeth thoroughly for the health of House Valois. Seeing this, the girl immediately tried to grab the cake back. Fine, I understand. I'll go brush once I finish this piece. But Agatha wasn't about to give her any wiggle room this time. Little sister, I trust in your gift of foresight, but that doesn't mean I'm willing to be your fool. And besides, the Duke recently sent word instructing me to ensure your safety and properly assist you, so please do cooperate. And so, the girl found herself dragged off to brush her teeth by Agatha. The moment she finished, she stormed off to the courtyard to blow off some steam. Agatha really was insufferable, forcibly tearing her away from her beloved desserts like that. He and Lisa really were cut from the same cloth. Deciding she no longer wanted to bother arguing with either of them, she figured she might as well take advantage of the nice weather and lie down in the grass for a nap instead. Just as she was about to drift off, Sean spotted her lying on the ground and rushed over immediately. My lady, why are you lying here? Are you feeling unwell? To avoid any unnecessary misunderstandings, the girl chose not to respond, which only made Jian assume the worst. Could this be my fault? Did you get scolded for eating with me, a slave? I'm so sorry, this is all because of me. As he spoke, he couldn't help but choke up, quietly sobbing. Sensing the situation spiraling out of control, the girl quickly sat up. No, Xian, please don't cry, I was just… But before she could finish, Jian pulled her into a tight hug. I'm truly sorry, my lady, were you scolded because of me? Are you hurt anywhere? This was the first time she'd ever seen him this emotionally overwhelmed, and it was clear he wasn't in any state to listen to reason right now. So she simply let him hold her until he calmed down enough for them to properly talk. Xian, are you all right? Why were you crying just now? I thought something had happened to you. Actually, I just wanted to take a nap, that's all. Why would you nap out here on the grass? No particular reason, I just felt like it suddenly. Hearing her carefree answer, Jian finally lost his composure completely. Even so, sleeping outside like that is far too dangerous. The girl, hearing him nag at her like this, suddenly felt a flicker of irritation. She'd already had more than enough lectures for one day. Wasn't she the young lady of House Valois? Shouldn't she be free to live however she pleased? Why did everyone insist on controlling her like this? Without thinking, she snapped at him. This is my own home, I'll do whatever I want. What business is it of yours? It wasn't until she saw the hurt look on his face that she realized she'd let her old villainous instincts slip out again. Just as she tried to properly explain herself, Jian simply turned to leave. Just go back to your room and sleep properly, stop worrying me. Unwilling to let him walk away so easily, the girl grabbed onto him at once. I'm sorry, Jian, I didn't mean it that way. I really do know I was wrong. Can you please not be angry anymore? To her surprise, he agreed almost immediately. I can forgive you, but can you promise me you won't do it again? Overjoyed at his response, the girl eagerly held up her pinky finger. Of course, I promise I'll never worry Jian like that again. With their pinky promise sealed, the two finally made up completely. Hoping to ease Jian's lingering guilt, the girl proposed that he stay on to work at the ducal estate as a way of repaying him for saving her life, but to their mutual delight quickly turning into disappointment. The idea was flatly rejected the moment they went to ask Agatha for permission. Not long after their reconciliation, the girl asked Jian why he'd come to the garden in the first place. It turned out he'd come specifically looking for her, feeling he owed her a great deal. She had saved his life and given him food and shelter, so he felt obligated to find some way to repay her kindness, though he hadn't been sure how. Hearing this, she immediately suggested he stay and work for their family instead. This way he could earn money while also staying close to her every day, though she admitted she was a little worried about how Agatha might react, and reassured him she wasn't forcing the decision on him either. Xian's expression turned conflicted at this. Can I really trust House Valois? The girl understood that Xian wasn't just some ordinary slave, and that he seemed to harbor deep-seated resistance toward House Valois, but she hoped he could trust her regardless. She'd always been proud of her family. They'd led the knights to countless victories in war, earned the loyalty of countless vassals, and most importantly, had her unbeatable father commanding it all, so Jian had absolutely nothing to worry about. And no matter what choice he ultimately made, they would always remain friends. Then, out of nowhere, Xian asked whether working here could earn him 5,000 gold coins. The girl smiled and told him of course it could. And from that very moment, though she didn't realize it, Xian had already begun quietly planning to buy his own freedom, so he could stay by her side forever. Of course, things didn't go quite as smoothly as expected. Agatha strongly opposed the idea. Seeing him refuse to budge no matter what, the girl decided to bring out her trump card, widening her eyes and putting on her sweetest, pleading voice. But since we already brought Xian into our home, isn't it only right that we take responsibility for him? So please, sweetheart, I'm begging you to agree. Agatha found himself completely helpless against her persistence, and the girl, assuming she'd already won him over, happily began celebrating with Jian, only to have Agatha throw a bucket of cold water on their excitement. I never said this was actually approved. And also, please send him away for now. I think we need to have a proper talk. In the end, the girl reluctantly told Jian to head back to his room and wait for her. Once Jian was out of earshot, Agatha's expression turned dark. Little sister, are you serious right now? Is this also one of your prophecies? Flustered, the girl quickly explained. Xian wasn't part of any prophecy I had. Meeting him was simply fate. Agatha found this explanation utterly exasperating. Forget about fate for a moment. We need to seriously discuss the council meeting. The family heads won't easily believe in prophecy. We need to think of another approach. A defeated nation suddenly going silent practically screams rebellion, and under these circumstances, I honestly don't know how we can justify continuing their financial aid. Yet you insist that cutting off the aid will lead to our family's total destruction. The girl nodded in agreement. That was indeed the truth of it. In the end, what really mattered was making sure they didn't provoke the half-blooded Prince Peter. Just as the girl was about to share her other thoughts, Lisa suddenly rushed in urgently. "This is bad. There's an emergency, sir." Upon hearing this, Agatha had no choice but to cut their conversation short. He needed to go receive Duke Bell immediately. At the mention of Duke Bell's name, the girl's heart tightened. Duke Bell, originally a branch family of House Valois, had climbed his way into becoming one of the 4 great houses through underhanded means, and he'd always been consumed with jealousy over their family's power, obsessively imitating everything about them without ever having the ability to actually replace them. Just then, a knock sounded at the door. Assuming it was Agatha returning, the girl rushed to answer, only to find a blue-haired little girl clutching a rabbit plush burst through instead. The girl seemed thrilled to see her. "Father, I finally found her. My lady, this is the first time I've actually seen you in person. And you really do have the black hair and violet eyes just like I heard. It's incredible." Annoyed by the noise, the girl responded with an intimidating stare. "Why are you here? Don't you know it's rude to show up uninvited?" The little girl immediately burst into tears at this. "I'm sorry, my father told me to come find you. I thought it would be fine." Watching her cry like that, the girl felt a wave of helplessness. This kid was just as much of a crybaby as she remembered from her past life. It turned out the little girl was Duke Bell's daughter, Bella, someone who'd grown up constantly compared to her father, mocked endlessly for her inability to use magic. Though she seemed a little slow, she would eventually go on to become the youngest chief magician in history. Thinking it over, the girl figured Bella had likely been dragged along by her father too, so it wasn't really fair to take her frustration out on her. Seeing her tears still falling, and wanting to calm her down, the girl invited her to enjoy some delicious cake together. At the mention of cake, Bella immediately stopped crying, all because his daughter had simply been holding the little blonde boy's hand. The Devil Duke had already grown restless. The treasure he cherished so dearly wasn't something just anyone could covet. Not long before, Duke Bell's daughter, Bella, had suddenly barged into the girl's room and ended up in tears from being startled. To comfort her, the girl had invited her to share some cake, and the strawberry cake's charm proved as powerful as ever after just a few bites. Bella had calmed down completely. Once she'd settled, the girl asked her to explain why she'd come. And the next moment, Bella eagerly began asking about her age, along with what her life had been like before returning to the estate. Assuming Bella was just an innocent little kid, the girl casually made up a story. "I'm 5 years old this year, and before coming back to the estate, I was living with a wealthy family in the Free Territories." But the moment the words left her mouth, Bella's expression turned unsettling. "You're lying. Everyone knows you spent your first 5 years as a slave in the Viscount's household. I looked into it thoroughly. You're such a liar." The girl was stunned that Duke Bell had actually told his daughter all this. And what followed was even more eye-opening. Bella flashed her a strange, unsettling smile. "If I were as pitiful as you, would father pay more attention to me too?" With that, she flung her rabbit plush straight at the girl. And before she could even react, Bella burst into loud sobbing. The next moment, Duke Bell came rushing in, and the two of them put on quite the dramatic display of father-daughter affection right in front of her, leaving no doubt now about what was really going on. The girl had originally assumed Bella was simply an innocent, kind-hearted child, but it turned out she was just as much of a schemer as her father. Thinking this over, she flung the rabbit plush right back. "Care to explain yourselves? I already have my own white cat plush. Who wants your ugly black rabbit anyway? You two barged into my room without any warning, and now you're accusing me of assault? Guards, get these two shameless intruders out of here." Duke Bell, seeing this, moved to teach her a lesson himself. But the next moment, a swarm of knights came rushing in instead. Fortunately, Agatha arrived just in time to prevent an all-out brawl. Seeing Agatha, Duke Bell regained a bit of his composure. "Agatha? Perfect timing. I think this young lady has spent too long as a slave. It's left her rather poorly mannered. You really should discipline her more." Agatha glanced over at the girl. "Duke Bell, you're absolutely right." Seeing even Agatha siding with father and daughter, the girl's spirits sank instantly. But the next moment, Agatha calmly took the rabbit plush from her hands. "But I think you still don't quite understand House Valois. On our territory, the master's word is absolute law. Even if my lady really had done something to your daughter, you'd have no right to interfere." With that, Agatha handed the rabbit plush back to them, leaving Duke Bell speechless with anger. Then, in an effortlessly casual tone, Agatha added, "And if you insist on pursuing this further, I'd be happy to write to the Duke and have him return home. I'm sure he'd love nothing more than to discuss this with you personally." At the mention of her father, Duke Bell instantly deflated, snatching the rabbit plush and dragging Bella away in a hurry. This whole mess was resolved smoothly thanks to Agatha, and it made the girl realize just how much her father's presence mattered around the estate. With that in mind, she suddenly came up with a plan for handling the Dolo Kingdom aid situation. By the time Agatha finished settling everything and returned to his room, he found a letter waiting from her father. 80% of the letter was devoted entirely to praising the girl, leaving Agatha thoroughly exasperated by just how besotted her father had become. As expected, he also mentioned he'd be skipping the council meeting once again this time. Still, given the chaos that had unfolded today, Agatha decided he should update her father regardless. The man clearly still cared deeply about his precious daughter after all. And thinking back on how strong and independent the girl had shown herself to be, Agatha found himself sensing that she truly might be capable of changing House Valois' fate. What he didn't know, however, was that upon reading his report, her father had nearly lost his mind with rage, not so much over Duke Bell taking advantage of his absence to bully his daughter, but rather that some little blonde upstart had dared to covet her in the first place. For a man this devoted to his daughter, that was simply unforgivable. So her father immediately decided to abandon the queen he'd been waiting on for so many days and head straight home instead, eager to properly deal with the little blonde boy who dared to hold his daughter's hand. Determined to help restore her family's reputation, the girl resolved to stop slacking off, and this would mark the very first time she demonstrated real strength in front of the Branch families. Before she knew it, the day of the council meeting had arrived. That day, the girl hurried toward the meeting room, with Lisa rushing anxiously behind her, delivering some paperwork she'd forgotten, while Agatha arrived just in time to escort her. He made sure to double-check that she hadn't forgotten anything else, and complimented how sharp and composed she looked today. All thanks, of course, to the maid's careful help getting her ready. Combined with the pendant representing House Valois, the black panther-shaped hair tie, and her face so strikingly similar to the Duke's, anyone could immediately recognize her as the young lady of House Valois. Agatha then carefully reviewed the documents in her hands. Though he would be the one relaying her opinions during the meeting itself, he'd deliberately prepared research materials for her ahead of time, just to make it look like she was genuinely engaged with the proceedings. Now all she had to do was walk in with these papers, sit properly through the meeting, and do her best to answer the vassals' questions when the time came, leaving them with a good impression. The girl clearly hadn't expected the vassals might actually question her directly, but Agatha reassured her not to worry. After all, this would be their very first meeting, so of course they'd have plenty of questions. Hearing this, she suddenly collapsed to the ground, trembling uncontrollably. The council meeting hadn't even started yet, and she was already losing her nerve. How embarrassing. The next moment, Agatha extended his hand toward her. "Don't worry, little sister. What the vassals want isn't some cold, heartless head of House Valois. They want a leader who genuinely longs to see the family thrive again. I'm sure everyone will come to love you." Hearing his words, the girl finally felt herself relax and took his hand as they made their way to the meeting room together. Being the first to arrive, she still couldn't quite shake her nerves, but she did her best to calm herself down. In her memory, the vassals had always been decent people. It was simply that their leader, her father, being such a madman, had left them constantly suffering, facing criticism no matter where they went. Eventually, once the family finally collapsed, everyone except Duke Bell, who'd always coveted their power, had rushed to sever ties with House Valois, and that was what truly sealed their downfall. Now her job was to protect this family, which in a way made her and the vassals' allies working toward the same goal. All she could hope for now was that her sincerity would reach them. Just then, Viscount Candace was the first to arrive. Seeing that her father wasn't present, his disappointment was obvious, and he simply gave the girl a fleeting glance, before walking right past her, as though he hadn't even noticed her at all. The other vassals soon filed in as well, muttering their discontent over the Duke's absence. Then, without further discussion, they began casting their votes, eager to wrap up this pointless meeting as quickly as possible. Watching them push forward with the proposal to cut off aid to the Dolo Kingdom, the girl could no longer stay silent. Gripping her blue rejection token, she slammed it down on the table. Please withdraw this proposal. On behalf of House Valois, I oppose cutting off aid to the Dolo Kingdom. Thinking back on how nervous she'd been just moments ago because of these people, the girl felt a wave of irritation. It seemed as though none of these vassals truly cared about the family at all. She then turned her attention to Viscount Candace, whose appearance closely resembled the direct bloodline of House Valois. He had also once been the youngest family head in the Empire's history, achieving that distinction thanks to his exceptional skill in alchemy. Remembering rumors about him from her past life, the girl decided to address him directly. How has your weapons business been coming along lately? Candace was visibly startled. He hadn't expected such a young girl to know anything about that. Even Agatha, standing nearby, hadn't expected this either, and quietly leaned in to ask why she was bringing up such a private matter. The girl quietly explained that she was simply trying to reignite the vassal's passion for restoring the family, a response that earned Agatha's full approval. To everyone's surprise, Candace genuinely began reporting his recent progress to her, though he couldn't help but wonder, just how had a mere 5-year-old come to take an interest in such things? In response, the girl held up 4 little fingers with an air of pure innocence. I suppose it started around the time I was 4. After all, I'd already learned to read by then. While staying at the Viscount's estate, I kept up with House Valois' situation through the newspapers. So please, everyone, feel free to speak your minds. Let's work together to restore this family. That's really the whole point of this meeting. Determined to properly discipline the little blonde upstart who dared try to steal his daughter's affection, her father hadn't hesitated to abandon his meeting with the queen entirely, rushing straight home instead. And the moment he laid eyes on the girl again, he understood. Nothing in this world mattered more than this little one in his arms. Not long before, thanks to the girl's outstanding performance at the council meeting, she'd earned the vassal's genuine approval. Just as she prepared to move the meeting forward, Marquis Twiline proposed expanding their family's shipping operations into the southern territories, arguing it would make trade with the free nations far more convenient. Hearing this proposal, the girl felt an immediate sense of alarm. After all, she'd once planned on settling down in the free nations herself after running away. Sensing her unease, Viscount Candace quickly redirected Marquis Twiline back to the matter at hand, reminding everyone that today's purpose was to decide whether to withdraw aid from the Dolo Kingdom. A gray-haired vassal spoke up first. I believe we should withdraw it. As a defeated nation, how dare they go silent without a word? Isn't that essentially treason? A red-haired vassal voiced his agreement, arguing that House Valois, of all families, should be the one to set the example. Watching the vassals engage so actively, Agatha couldn't help but look at the girl with newfound admiration. Just then, Lisa and an attendant rushed in urgently. The attendant whispered something into Agatha's ear, and his expression immediately turned grave. He leaned in close to the girl and quietly informed her that an assassin had infiltrated the estate, instructing her to stay put until the threat was neutralized. Agatha then reassured the vassals and let the meeting continue on. Meanwhile, Jean had finished his entire meal without complaint. Ever since the girl had lectured him, he'd made sure to clean his plate every single time. This pleased his maid greatly, and she reminded him that since it was council meeting day, he shouldn't wander off unnecessarily. Stan, however, was far more concerned with whether the girl would be attending the meeting. The maid initially hesitated to answer, but upon seeing the icy look in his eyes, she reluctantly confirmed that yes, she would be there. Satisfied with the answer, Jean quietly turned his head away. Once the maid left, he pulled out the necklace used to contact his true master. Remembering how she'd specifically instructed him to bring it along to House Valois' council meeting, it was clear she intended to make her move there, though he had no idea what exactly she planned to do to the girl. His master had always harbored deep hatred toward House Valois, and he feared she might inflict serious harm on the girl. The thought left him unable to sit still any longer. Before meeting the girl, he had lived every day like it was hell, and it was she who had freed him from that suffering. He couldn't just stand by and watch her be taken by his master. This time, he decided, he would be the one to protect her. Meanwhile, the atmosphere in the meeting room had grown tense. Despite Agatha's best efforts to reassure everyone, The vassals remained visibly uneasy, and the girl herself, caught up in the anxious mood, found herself missing her father. Noticing her unease, Agatha handed her the research materials he'd prepared earlier. "My lady, would you be willing to share your thoughts personally? If it comes from you, I'm certain everyone will listen carefully." Understanding his intention, she accepted the responsibility with a serious expression. She was, after all, the direct heir of House Valois. She couldn't let some petty assassin rattle her composure. So she declared firmly to everyone that she opposed withdrawing aid from the Dolo Kingdom, and just as she expected, someone immediately raised objections. But she remained perfectly calm, choosing instead to guide them gently toward her way of thinking. She began by explaining that since House Valois had played a key role in the war, they would naturally end up managing the Dolo Kingdom afterward, meaning its people would eventually become citizens of House Valois' own territory. If they withdrew the aid now, the resentment and desire for revenge among those people would be directed squarely at House Valois. Of course, the vassals didn't seem particularly concerned about this point, confident that with House Valois' strength, any rebellion could easily be crushed. The girl responded with feigned agreement. "You do have a point there. Honestly, I could go along with withdrawing the aid too, but I don't think House Valois needs to be the one sticking its neck out first. Instead, why don't we quietly spread word to Duke Bell's household that we're planning to withdraw the aid ourselves? After all, Duke Bell's family is currently one of the 4 great houses and holds considerable influence. We can simply sit back and watch how things unfold." The plan was undeniably sound, though the vassals were curious why she'd specifically chosen Duke Bell's family for this. The girl explained that she no longer trusted Duke Bell as an ally. A family so obsessed with imitating and replacing others could hardly be expected to stay loyal to the very house it mimicked. If she were ever the head of the family herself, she'd certainly want to eliminate such a threat before it became a problem. With that, she confidently placed down her red token, cementing her stance. The meeting room fell into stunned silence after she made her move, and just as she began to worry she'd said something wrong, the vassals suddenly broke into enthusiastic praise for her cleverness, some even expressing eagerness to see her grow up and take over the family. The girl hadn't expected that such a small maneuver would win over the vassals so completely, an unexpected silver lining. Really. And it was all thanks to that deeply ingrained villainous instinct of hers. Whenever cornered, simply find a convenient scapegoat and slip away cleanly. It wasn't the noblest approach, admittedly, but given that it was meant to protect the family, and considering Duke Bell truly wasn't a good man to begin with, a little underhandedness hardly seemed like something to feel guilty about. Just then, Lisa rushed in to report the assassin situation to Agatha. Apparently, the assassin had died under mysterious circumstances. Just as the girl processed this shocking news, the windows of the meeting room suddenly shattered violently, sending Agatha scrambling to shield her protectively. The next instant, a painfully familiar figure appeared in the doorway. Her father, his face twisted with murderous intent. "Where is that damn blonde brat?" Taking in the sight of the panicked room before him, her father finally seemed to realize something was off, though he still bluntly demanded to know why Agatha was holding his daughter, startling Agatha into quickly releasing her. Watching the chaos her father had caused, the girl felt an overwhelming headache coming on, and immediately launched into a scolding. "Why did you just leave without saying a word? If you do that again, I'm never speaking to you again." In response to her scolding, her father simply offered a faint smile, all his earlier rage having melted away the instant he laid eyes on this little one. His behavior left the vassals completely stunned. Was this doting, love-struck man really the same ruthless, merciless devil duke they all feared? House Valois' own young lady had nearly fallen victim to an assassin's attack, and thankfully her father had made it back just in time. This whole incident also made him finally realize just how important the girl truly was to him. He resolved to fully let go of his deceased wife and dedicate the rest of his life to protecting her instead. Not long before, her father had suddenly stormed into the council meeting looking utterly murderous, nearly frightening everyone present half to death. His mind consumed entirely with thoughts of his precious daughter, not caring one bit what anyone else thought. "By the way, sweetheart, I heard you made a new friend recently." At the mention of Jian, the girl excitedly launched into introducing him. "That's right, father. Jian is my very first friend. He's a boy with blonde hair, dark eyes, and fair skin as delicate as a porcelain doll." Watching his precious daughter praise the boy, so enthusiastically only made the purple aura swirling around her father grow thicker. Is that so? Now that you mention it, I'm curious too. Why don't we go meet him right now? Hearing this, the girl immediately hopped down from her father's arms. Then let's hurry to the treatment room on the 4th floor to find Jian. Perfect timing too, since I was actually planning to make him my personal servant once you got back. Her father's fist clenched even tighter at this. And Agatha, sensing danger, quickly caught up to them just as father and daughter were about to head off to find Jian. Duke, don't you still have important matters to attend to? Fortunately, Agatha managed to hold her father back in time, and instead brought him to examine the assassin's body. Agatha explained that by the time the guards had located the assassin, after learning of the intrusion, he was already dead. Her father lifted the white cloth covering the body and carefully examined the wound. It didn't appear particularly deep, likely inflicted by some kind of dagger. Suddenly, he noticed something unusual. The wound's edges were unnervingly clean, almost as though cut with scissors through paper, suggesting the killer might possess an aura-based ability, meaning this situation had just grown far more complicated. Aura was an extraordinarily refined skill, one only masters of swordsmanship could ever hope to wield, and it possessed a unique property that made it impossible to counter with any other kind of power or imagination itself. Because of this, no matter how skilled someone was in magic or holy power, they would never dare approach an aura user carelessly. Fortunately, all registered aura users within the Empire were on record, meaning they could be cross-referenced systematically, and they would also need to investigate the movements of any aura users in the surrounding area, particularly near where the assassin had been found. Looking down at the corpse once more, her father's expression grew increasingly grim. If an aura user really had infiltrated House Valois, then the girl, who had been attending the council meeting at the time, had truly been in grave danger. Had the assassin's real target actually been her instead of some random killer, her father might have lost his precious daughter, just as he'd lost his beloved wife. And the thought sent him spiraling back into deep self-blame. It made him want to strangle his past self. Why had he clung so desperately to someone already gone, while neglecting the one still alive right in front of him? He truly had been a terrible father. In the end, he seemed to arrive at some kind of resolution, and surprised everyone by finally instructing Agatha to arrange for his wife's funeral. Meanwhile, a maid had come to bring Xian his dinner, only to find his room completely empty, the window left wide open, and she rushed off in a panic to report that he'd gone missing. What she didn't know was that at that very moment, Jian lay collapsed in a pool of blood, the pain overwhelming his mind until he slipped into unconsciousness. As he drifted through the haze, he found himself back at age 5, the day he'd been injured for the very first time during training. He remembered dragging his bloodied arm to find his mistress, sobbing, begging her for help. But she had only coldly turned him away. "Why are you coming to me looking like this? Go to the infirmary and clean yourself up properly, and don't ever come to me again until you've made yourself presentable." Blood had trickled steadily down his arm that day, mirroring the way his heart had shattered into pieces. Afterward, he'd obediently bandaged his own wound. And when his mistress saw him again looking cleaned up, she'd simply given him an approving pat on the head, though somehow it hadn't made him feel any better at all. And from that day on, she had never cried out in pain again. He understood that no amount of tears would ever change anything, a lesson he'd learned at just 5 years old. To keep the girl safe from the assassin, Xian had taken it upon himself to face the killer completely alone, leaving himself covered in wounds by the end. He'd assumed, as always, that no one would care what happened to him. But to his surprise, the girl broke down crying over him. Not long before, the badly wounded Jian had been discovered just in time and rescued. When he finally regained consciousness, he found himself in an unfamiliar room, his right arm throbbing sharply with pain. The girl sitting beside him immediately demanded answers the moment she saw him wake. "How exactly did you get hurt? Was it you who took down the assassin? Do you have any idea how worried I was when I heard you'd been found collapsed in the bushes? Why would you do something so reckless?" Seeing her obvious concern left Jian feeling deeply guilty, but he couldn't bring himself to reveal the whole truth, and simply stammered that he'd stumbled upon the assassin by chance. The girl let out a bitter laugh at this. "Then you really should have come to find me for help first." Hearing this, Jian couldn't help but think of his former mistress. In the exact same situation, she would have simply told him not to bother coming to her at all. The realization that the girl actually valued him this deeply left a warm ache spreading through his chest. It's all right, my lady. I've already been treated. The pain's gone now. Hearing his response, the girl only cried even harder. You always say it's fine, but there's nothing I can actually do for you if you keep saying that. Why do you always have to lie to me? It was the same with the steak, too, pretending you couldn't eat it when you actually could. I care about you so much, and yet you keep hiding things from me. It really hurts. So I'm asking you one last time. Does it actually hurt or not? Please just answer me honestly this time. Seeing the girl so distressed on his behalf, Xian seemed to reach some kind of resolution within himself. Cradling his arm, eyes brimming with tears, he finally admitted, "The truth is, it really does hurt. My arm and my shoulder both." Hearing this, the girl immediately pulled him into a comforting embrace. It's okay now, Jian. From now on, whenever you're in pain, just tell me properly. Once they'd both calmed down, she handed him a healing potion. Xian quietly accepted the potion, then with newfound sincerity, called out her name once more. Actually, I like you too. The girl froze in place at this, her face instantly flushing bright red. So, by like, you mean the way friends like each other, right? Seeing Xian nod along obliviously in agreement, she finally let out a sigh of relief. Then, as if remembering something, Jian asked whether her earlier promise to take responsibility for him still stood. Once she confirmed it did, he carefully asked one more thing, whether he could stay by her side forever. Without hesitation, the girl affirmed it, moving Xian so deeply that his eyes welled up with tears, and he immediately downed the entire healing potion in one gulp. It was only then that the girl remembered the troublesome matter of the assassin. When Xian learned she'd already discovered the assassin might be connected to the Dolo kingdom, his heart skipped uneasily, and he quickly asked whether she would hate him if he turned out to be from Dolo himself. The question caught her completely off guard, but she quickly recovered, smiling as she patted his shoulder reassuringly. If someone's as kind as you, Xian, there's no way I could ever hate them. Afterward, the girl prepared to take her leave, and before she left, Xian reminded her not to break her promise. She found the remark a little unfair. Did she really seem like the type of person to go back on her word? Still, thinking it over, she realized just how much she'd already managed to change during this 100th life. Not only had she resolved the whole matter of the Dolo Kingdom's aid, but she'd also successfully prevented her father from ever meeting the queen, meaning Prince Peter would have no reason left to resent House Valois in the future. Still, something about Xian's earlier words continued to nag at her. He wasn't the type to make jokes carelessly, so why would he bring up the possibility of being from Dolo like that? Could there be something he wasn't telling her? The Devil Duke, once consumed entirely by his obsession to revive his late wife, had finally come to his senses, deciding to properly lay her to rest and start rebuilding his life. After nearly losing his daughter to an assassin's attack, he'd come to understand that perhaps everything really had happened for a reason. His wife's passing had once robbed him of any will to keep living, but the little angel she'd left behind had given him a reason to carry on. Not long before, Jian had risked everything to eliminate the assassin threatening the girl, leaving himself severely wounded in the process. And while visiting him, she'd noticed something else troubling: the offhand comment he'd made about possibly being from the Dolo kingdom. Thinking it over carefully, she realized Jian bore an uncanny resemblance to Prince Peter, the half-blooded Dolo prince who had personally ended her life in her past incarnation, the only real difference between them being their eye color. Combined with the Jian's seemingly casual remark, the girl found herself growing increasingly suspicious about his true identity. Just as she stood there lost in thought, the vassals' voices called her back to reality. It turned out her earlier serious expression had left them deeply impressed, remarking that father and daughter really were cut from the exact same mold. With the two of them together, House Valois truly seemed unstoppable. Hearing this, the girl glanced sideways at her father. Sure enough, the moment flattering words reached his ears, the corners of his mouth curled up uncontrollably, his smug expression a world apart from his usual demeanor. Still, her father's return had brought her considerable peace of mind, and she decided to set aside her lingering questions about Jian and Peter for now, focusing instead on properly wrapping up this council meeting. Just then, her father recalled the suggestion the girl had raised earlier in the meeting. Hearing this, she immediately expressed her wish to postpone canceling the aid to the Dolo kingdom, adding, half-jokingly, a request for praise. Father. Seeing her adorable little expression, he gently patted her head. Our little one truly is remarkable. even considering the family's long-term interests. Then, turning his cold gaze toward the vassals, he asked, "So does anyone have any objections to this?" Given that the outcome remained unchanged either way, the vassals quickly confirmed they had no objections, agreeing to simply follow suit whenever another family made the first move. With that matter settled, her father announced that he would no longer miss any future council meetings, and intended to return to the way things had been 5 years earlier, expressing his hope that the vassals would continue to support him properly going forward. Everyone in the room was utterly stunned by this declaration, especially the girl. Having lived through her past life, she knew all too well just how deep her father's obsession with her mother truly ran. He had even sought out Peter to beg for death after the queen, a holy woman, had died. And now this declaration was essentially an acknowledgement of her mother's true passing, which left her deeply worried for him. But this time, gazing into his once clouded eyes, she saw instead an unwavering determination to protect her, meaning that, in this life, he was making this change specifically for her sake. While this was undeniably something to be happy about, the girl still couldn't help feeling a quiet ache. Her father's transformation might finally bring their story to a happy ending, but the pain of losing her mother would likely never fully heal. Just then, a light drizzle began to fall from the sky, and her father, rushing over, wrapped his cloak protectively around her. Noticing she hadn't brought an umbrella, he didn't hesitate to take off his own cloak and wrap her snugly inside it. Watching him willingly get soaked just to shield her, the girl felt an overwhelming warmth spread through her chest. Across 2 lifetimes, this was the very first time she'd truly experienced what it meant to have a father's love. Afterward, he led her deep into the garden, where she finally saw her long-missed mother again. In her past life, her father had never bothered holding a proper funeral for her mother, so ever since leaving the Viscount's estate, she'd never seen her again. She never imagined he'd actually taken such good care of preserving her all this time. This time around, her father was finally ready to admit his own mistakes. "I'm sorry, sweetheart, for taking so long to bring you to see your mother. I fought with everything I had to try and save her, but the truth is, she'd already—" Watching him falter, unable to finish his sentence, the girl felt her heart ache for him, and gently took his hand, guiding the conversation toward happier memories instead. "Speaking of which, father, did you used to kiss mother's forehead every night before bed? And didn't she always nag you about eating your broccoli?" Sure enough, the moment he heard the word broccoli, her father's face twisted with obvious resistance. They really were father and daughter through and through. Hoping to steer the conversation away from the dreaded topic of broccoli, the girl instead asked about how her parents had fallen in love. It turned out her father had fallen for her mother at first sight, after she'd swept in and rescued him like a true hero. The two of them talked long into the night about her mother, and by the time the girl could barely keep her eyes open any longer, she made her father promise, before drifting off to sleep, not to rush into burying her mother just yet. Only once he could finally stand before her with a genuine smile, free of grief, should he let her go. With that, the girl finally succumbed to exhaustion, drifting off to sleep leaning against her father. Her words, though, remained etched deeply in his heart. He gently wrapped an arm around her shoulders, filled with boundless gratitude toward his late wife for leaving behind such a warm, precious little angel. The next day, father and daughter made the unprecedented request for the head chef to prepare an entire meal centered around broccoli, while also asking Agatha to arrange for some tea. This sudden change left both Agatha and the chef utterly baffled, but in truth, father and daughter simply wanted to honor her mother's memory this way. After all, she had always loved watching the two of them eat their broccoli while she was alive, and tea had been one of her favorite things too. Looking back over recent events, her father had spent so long solely fixated on trying to save her, so this time he decided to postpone the funeral instead, choosing to properly cherish her memory first. As it turned out, though, father and daughter had both drastically overestimated their tolerance for broccoli. By the time Agatha arrived with the freshly brewed tea, he found the two of them lying flat on their backs. Utterly defeated, the once mighty House Valois nearly brought down, not by war or betrayal, but by a humble plate of broccoli. After successfully changing her father, the girl decided it was finally time to call back the little chubby bird she hadn't seen in so long. For the occasion, she prepared a lavish strawberry cake and even handwrote, "I'm sorry" 100 times over. After all, ever since she'd torn up its letter and their falling out, it had stayed away for a full 2 months straight. Before that fallout, it used to visit her every couple of weeks without fail, which left her feeling more than a little uneasy. She could only hope to see it again soon, promising herself she'd never act so recklessly toward it again. But to her surprise, she ended up waiting a full hour with nothing to show for it. And just as she was ready to give up and go to sleep in frustration, she suddenly heard its familiar cooing. Rushing over, she soon discovered the little bird collapsed weakly on the table, and in a panic, she scooped it up to check on it, only to find that even injured, it hadn't forgotten to eat cake. And after devouring an entire slice, it made a full recovery almost instantly. This left her utterly speechless, though she still made sure to apologize properly, and thankfully, the little bird no longer held it against her. When she asked where it had been all this time, what she never expected to hear was that the real reason it had stayed away wasn't neglect at all, but rather, another returned soul had been deliberately getting in its way.